about 5 or 6 years ago, we actually started teaching AI.
There's other nephew in my family who's asking me that, which career is the best one right now. And I'm like, honestly,
What problem do you want to solve? And because, especially with our STEM, educating students now where they can find a passion or a problem to solve.
Welcome to Tomo Club and Learn podcast.
welcome our fellow school leaders. I'm Avinash Bansal, co-founder at Tomo Club. And today on our Tomo Club podcast series, we have the Superintendent of Putnam County School District, Rick Surrency. Welcome to our podcast, Rick.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So honestly, I love the turnaround that you've got in the graduation rate from 55% to 92% in just 6 years. And I also saw, correct me if I'm wrong, that you took a retirement and then you came back as a superintendent, right?
Sure did. I had 38 years in, and I had been a principal for 10 years, and then I retired. And then, I had this opportunity to come back. And by the way, I'm an elected superintendent, which is really, in the United States, that's extremely rare. But I ran for election, and we have to run for election every 4 years on the same cycle as the presidential election. But I was elected and have been reelected twice, or 3 times, excuse me, a total of 3. I'm in my 3rd term now, but I enjoy this. I'm in my 48th year, and I just love coming to work. And retirement was not for me at the time. Maybe I'll try it later, but this is my passion right now.
Wow, now that's incredible, because again, two of the rare things that people coming back from retirement back to being an elected superintendent is definitely rare. So we'll definitely deep dive into it. And today's topic is also very interesting, that how STEM and CTE transformation school students opportunities. But before all that, first thing I always ask my guest is, what got you into education in the first place? And is that reason still valid after all these years?
That's a great question. And, I actually started in education in the 1970s. And I actually wanted to be a coach, athletic coach, which I was. And I knew in order to coach, I needed, probably have a job in education so I could coach. That was my initial passion. But after a while, that kind of ran its course. And I really found that at the time, teaching and just engaging with kids, which is really what coaching is.
Yeah.
I found that I really had a passion for education and just helping kids succeed and watching them grow and that type of thing. And eventually, I got into leadership role, earned my doctorate degree in educational leadership, and just trying to help kids on a different scale, on a larger scale. So that's why we're in the business of education, just to help kids.
No, absolutely. But did you become an athletic coach in between, or did you directly got into academics?
Well, I actually started off as an athletic coach, and I started off as an instructional assistant, kind of like a teaching assistant or
Right.
a paraprofessional. I did that for a couple of years, and then when I started teaching, I did that for several years, and then got on into administration. But yeah, the coaching part, I love that. I did that for a number of years. But again, that is just an extension of teaching, because really coaching is teaching. And I try to coach teachers and other leaders now. So it's really the same thing, just on a different scale.
No, absolutely. I think I was just interviewing another superintendent, and he had a similar story. He was a wrestling coach for a longest time, and then he became a superintendent. And he was telling me how much he has learned. The strategies of coaching in leadership makes so much sense, especially the fact that, like, you are in the background, but your students are gonna be out in the field. So that makes you feel that you have to trust them, you have to give them power, and you are just a felicitator, so that and at the end of the day, they are the performers. So I think having that kind of mindset comes a lot from athletic. So yeah, I have heard those
Well,
stories.
and it really is about, the number one word there is relationships.
Yeah.
When you're coaching a student or coaching a player, you really form a bond with them. And the same thing with teaching. Kids learn when they can bond with the person that's teaching them. I mean, if they don't like them or they can't communicate with them, learning does not take place. So same thing with coaching. It really is trying to bond with that player and get the best out of them and help them be a better version of themselves.
Absolutely. So, asking the first most interesting element that I found, what got you back into education after the retirement?
Well, and I always kid people when I retired, my wife gave me so many chores to do around the house that I told people I had to go back to work to get some rest because yeah. So retirement was not working out at that time, but maybe the next time I do it, I'll try it a little different. But yeah, I really did miss it, and I just love this is my happy place, and I love coming here and just working with other leaders and that type thing. So retirement is not necessarily an age; it's just whenever you feel like you've made your mark and left your legacy, and
Right, right.
that's where I'm at now.
Love it. Love that answer. Uh, because I have also seen that retirement is not everyone's cup of tea because we get so much happiness out of our work that feeling away from it just doesn't work. Like I remember whenever I take like a 10-day break, during the summer break or the winter break, I feel so eager to get back to work because it doesn't stop. It just my mind is always running for it because you're right. It's driven from the passion for education for students.
You know what? I read a book years ago, and it talked about your career working, and when we first start working, we're really trying to make ends meet and trying to pay bills, and of course we still do that. It's about being productive, but as you get later in life, like I am, I mean, I'm approaching 70 now. It really is about um, being significant, feeling like you're making an impact, you're leaving a legacy. It's not necessarily working to pay bills.
Hmm.
That's what our initial thing is. But work now is really just um, I don't want to say a hobby, but
Yeah.
it is such a part of my life that I don't see myself doing anything else for some time.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've seen that work doesn't feel like work, honestly, if you're loving it. And also, that's a different topic altogether. That how to deal with retirement. It's such a complicated situation out there for people because you do get that feeling of, worthless and everything negative about it. That it is hard. So that's definitely a different topic, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. But I'll stick to today's topic around education. So you inherited a 55% graduation rate, and you just flipped it over. So from your perspective, what was the single biggest reason that first of all students were not graduating, or were feeling disconnected from education in the first place, and what you did that improved it?
Well, and I've told this story many times. And when I first actually I had people in our community approach me about, running for superintendent because our graduation rate was so poor and it really was impacting our local economy. I mean, we had a developer that was going to come in and build a large development in our community. And once they found out that our graduation rate was, 54%, they decided to back out. And that had a negative impact on our community.
Right.
So, that started the process. And then we had a team that did a lot of research and came up with really a system. It really is about developing a systematic approach. And we did a lot of practices, looking at our data. For example, when a student withdrew to go to another school, we made sure that they enrolled at another school. Otherwise, they would count against your graduation rates. But
Right.
more than that is we put a systematic approach in from kindergarten through 12th grade, looking at those transitional years, like third grade, sixth grade, ninth grade, to
Hmm.
make sure they were on target. And we looked at a lot of what we call early warning signs,
Hmm.
where they being absent a lot, was a lot of discipline problems, were they failing more than one class? I mean, there were a number of little signs that we were looking at, and we would target those students to make sure they were on track. But as we get into talking about CTE and STEM, I think that was really the secret sauce. I mean, we started providing opportunities for our kids that they had not had before, and it really gave education something for students that was relevant. It, I think a lot of kids got in school and they did not see the end, but we provided some programming that students got involved in to say, you know what, if I graduate and I graduate on time, I can really have a successful career that is something that I'm really interested in. So with all that brought in together, and I'll be honest with you, we kind of surprised ourselves. We had a target. We were by a certain time, like within a 5 year span, our goal initially was 80%. But we started seeing our rates skyrocket every year. And essentially, we made it the 92.5%, which really, at that time, was the largest increase of any school district in the state of Florida. So, and of course, I've received a lot of attention and accolades, which really just represents the work of our district. But I was our state superintendent of the year in 2023
Right.
because people around the state recognize that was, really a remarkable accomplishment. So I'm really proud of that.
That's first of all, congratulations on that. And that's super interesting that you could identify the transition years as the biggest drop off. And STEM and CTE being the solutions, effective solutions, but they were existing before that as well, right? To a certain degree. So, what was the different part? Why, and how did they engage now, and they were not engaged before?
Well, to me, that is a great question because really, we had students become um, responsible for their own learning.
Okay.
Traditional teaching, when I started teaching, it was the teacher would stand up, they would deliver information, and if the students, learn, then they learned or they didn't learn. But the teachers were just focused on delivering of information. But now we've turned the tide where the students needed to process the information. We wanted the students to be engaged. We wanted the students to engage with each other. And that's what we look at when we go into classrooms. We look at, are those students talking to each other?
Hmm.
Is there engagement? And I always talk about student engagement. I call it butts up engagement, where they are so interested in the content, they are literally up out of their seats, leaning up over the desk, doing a task. And that's when you can really see students are engaged. But I think the old way of just standing up and I did it too, standing up and just delivering information is not learning. That might be you might be delivering the lesson, but there's no way that you can measure that the students are learning. So we had a completely different perspective on what learning meant, and that was relationships and engagement with the students.
You know how obvious it may sound. It's not that obvious to implement because because of the inertia itself. So I'm glad that even you are quickly revamping your strategies and understanding that, because otherwise, if you look at a traditional system, speaking in class, talking to your peers is discouraged. And what you just said feels honestly very right thing to do, but not that obvious. So I'm glad you could brought that up and promoted kids to talk, because that's what's gonna be relevant for them in the future point of view also, and not even future, but at the same time, the effectiveness of the class will go massive up. So yeah, I think that's a very good insight. But what I want to understand, what I always say, that it's difficult to follow someone's success, but it's always easier to prevent someone else's mistakes. So a lot of school leaders who will listen to this conversation, they have a plan of action of what a CTE program should look like in their school. I would like to know from your point of view, what's the easiest pitfall that people actually don't see, and what are the reasons where it can go wrong?
As far as CTE programs,
Yeah.
well, first of all, you have to the number one thing we need to look at what are the opportunities in our area, in our region for employment. I mean, if you create a CTE program and there are no jobs around to hire people for that, that career, then you're really wasting time. And then, I think the interest of students, you have to promote that. I mean, one of the first career programs we started we called it advanced manufacturing. And I actually had our largest private employer come to me soon after I got in office, and it was a paper mill. And he said, "Hey, I need for your school district to create a program that will generate new employees for us because we have a number of employees retiring." So, they looked at us as a pipeline. So we started this program, and the company actually provided us startup money, okay, which, they had a stake in that. So we were able to hire a teacher, we were able to buy materials. We actually got funding from our state legislature, startup money, and then we started the classes. It was highly technical, had a lot of technical stuff with it. Um, and then we started the class. We started graduating students with industry credentials. So we created that pipeline. And, in Florida, once you have students that graduate with industry certifications, then we receive additional funding. So what that does is it actually helps sustain that program. So that was one of our first ones, and then since then we've started other ones that really trying to meet the needs of our community. We started a firefighting EMT academy.
Okay.
We have started 3 building construction academies. We have a lot of construction going on. So we have several going on that really tries to address the needs of our local community. And once students get involved with that and they see other students graduating and getting those high demand, high wage jobs, that in itself can encourage students to get into that program. So that's kind of been our path, and it's been really successful, and I can't be more proud of it.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. Of course, listen to what's been asked from the employer side, but the employer's request or demands is also changing very rapidly. And but before I ask that, when is the CTE programs actually start? Is it starting from middle school or is it starting from grade 9 and above? When does it start?
Well, it really starts in grade 9 and above.
Okay.
But one important thing we did in our school district about 5 years ago, we actually we closed 5 schools, and mainly our middle schools, and we consolidated, and now we have kindergarten through 6 elementary schools, and we have grades 7 through 12 junior senior high schools. What's really neat about that is kids in junior high school are actually in the same school with senior high kids, and they are actually exposed to those programs at a much earlier age. And we might even offer some, just some initial classes in those CTE programs for those junior high kids. But we really want kids to start thinking about what kind of CTE program, if that's the path they choose, what's a program they might want to do, get them to thinking about that in junior high school. And then I think that creates so much more interest as they enroll in those actual programs when they get into 9th and 10th grade. So to me, that's been a big game changer for us.
No, absolutely. In fact, when I was growing up back in India, having K to 12 in the same school building was very common. And I remember when I was like in third grade, fourth grade, I used to always look up to those, high school kids, and I'm like, wow, they have so much freedom, they have so much to do, and they're so involved in school activities, they are hosting events. So I think for a lot of Indians back in India, seeing a high school kid along with them in the same premises is very common. So yeah, I think that's a good insight because it was a difficult concept for me to understand that elementary school is different, middle school is different, and there are like elementary school graduation, there are middle school graduation, which was completely a new concept to me. So yeah, I think that's a very good point of why, and consolidating will also help in preventing a lot of expenses, I'm sure.
Well,
Running
and
two
the
schools.
other thing too is when students transition from one school to another school, there's always a loss of learning and just that time of transition and adapting. And traditional school system has normally been a kindergarten through fifth, and then a middle school 6 through 8,
Yeah.
and then 9 through 12. And especially at the ninth grade level, when students transition from middle school into ninth grade, there was always that, kids had a lot of trouble adjusting to that high school. And now being in a junior, senior high school, that transition is not as profound. So
Yeah.
it really is a smooth transition. Really, those kids are getting a taste of what high school is like, and it really has been very beneficial.
Yeah, and plus they must be more aware about the faculty. They have seen those teachers around, so it's not like settling into a new environment. It does feel a continuation, just like sixth to seventh, and similarly. So I do feel that, and even then you can sometimes the high school teacher will also know what are the learning levels of the middle school students, because it will not be so disconnected for high school teachers. And I think having that kind of a journey is easy to comprehend for both teachers and students and parents, because I think parents do feel that, okay, middle school is getting over now. I have to think which high school should I send my child to. I think that question itself, I have talked to so many parents, become a stressful discussion at home, because then they have multiple choices, and parents is like, whenever there are choices, there are discussions, and it just adds to their stress. So yeah, I'm happy with this new change that you brought in.
Well, the other thing too, the other positive thing is having teachers talk to each other. For
Right.
example, having, for example, ninth grade teachers talking to eighth grade teachers and understanding, the content they're teaching and how that crosses over into the next grade. So I think that conversation always helps, and just having them in the same building,
Hmm.
really helps that process.
Right. But I was coming to that question before, but I prevented it that time. Was these the requirements at the employer end are changing very rapidly, especially due to AI. So it's very difficult to keep up. Even when I talk about the employees in my organization, even they have to keep themselves very agile in their thought process. Um, if they are used to do certain tasks certain way, it doesn't mean that that is the best way. They have been discussed about how do you improve efficiency, how do you improve your processes, literally every 15 days nowadays. So that's the level of flexibility we need to bring in at the employer end. And even the job profile, so somebody who was just a designer has started to become more like a marketeer in our company,
Mm.
because they can now understand the data, and they have the tools for easy to understand data, easy to crunch them. The company information is much more unified than before. People are not working in silos, so there is a lot of shift happening at the employer end. So it's difficult. If, let's say, if there's a nephew in my family who's asking me that, which career is the best one right now, and I'm like, honestly, the better question to ask is, what do you want to do? Because in every career right now there is paradigm shifts happening. So let's not talk about that part and talk about what you find exciting. So how are you dealing with that kind of shifts, in especially around AI?
Well, and I think the question that we ask is not what do you want to do when you grow up?
Hmm.
It's what problem do you want to solve?
Right.
And because especially with our STEM, we're educating students now for jobs that don't even exist yet.
Right.
And and what we have to do is give them those core skills, that critical thinking, where when they get out there, they can choose a path or they can find a passion or a problem to solve that that they're best lined up for. And we're
Hmm.
trying to create. I think you made a great point that we're having students come out of high school now with some skills and some knowledge, and like with AI and technology, that a lot of our employers may not even be up on. So I
Right.
think our kids are coming out better prepared than the current workforce. And I
Hmm.
think our businesses are really latching on to that. And we've actually, about 5 or 6 years ago, we actually started teaching AI in one of our high schools.
Okay.
Uh, Actually started teaching facial recognition technology. And, the problem was we didn't have any teachers certified in that at the time. So
Hmm.
we did something very innovative at the time. We actually had a college professor from Columbia University in New York
Hmm.
teach our class remotely or virtually. And the teacher was actually in the class, but the college professor would actually, you know, provide the instruction and the teacher was there to facilitate it. And of course, that teacher eventually became certified in AI himself. But
Hmm.
that was the initial approach in exposing our students to AI. The big thing about AI is, when it first really came onto the educational scene, I think it really scared a lot of people. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I heard some school districts that banned it and did not want anything to do with it because the kids would cheat on their test and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Well, AI is here to stay, and I think you would agree with that. And
Absolutely.
we have to embrace that. And it really is a tool that we can use not to necessarily find the answers, but to help to process the information and maybe just maybe speed up what we're doing. And I equate it back in the 1970s when I was in school. That's when the calculator came out,
Hmm.
the Texas Instrument calculator. And I'll never forget people back then were talking about, hey, if we let kids use calculators, they're going to cheat on their tests. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? Everybody has a calculator now.
Yeah.
And that's just part of what we do now. And I look at AI as being a tool that we're going to use, and I use it every day
Hmm.
just to, maybe just take some of the task out of learning, just to simplify it, organize information so we can process it. But students still have to be able to be critical thinkers and to be able to take that information and think about, hey, what's the best way we can use that?
No, I love that part, and it's the right way to look at it. That and in fact, the equity gap because of AI can actually reduce massively. But at the same time, if not given right training, the the equity gap because of AI can be huge. Like AI haves and AI have nots, like that, because the benchmark of output of somebody who is using AI is way up than somebody who's not. So I think if you look from both the angles of the use and the downside of not using it is massive. So I agree with that, and I love it. So tell me more about, like, when you brought in the professor, which grade level did he or she taught and teach, and what was the content look like, what does the impact look like? I'm more than eager to know more about it.
Well, and you're talking about the professor from
Yeah.
Columbia University. Yeah, and it was really, I mean, he gave them as a gentleman, he gave them tasks to do. The teacher would actually monitor those tasks, and at that time we didn't. It was really the early stages, and we were just learning ourselves.
Hmm.
But that really was kind of it really got us started in kind of an accelerator in our STEM programs now. So
Hmm.
that was really a remarkable class, and and we're really trying to integrate AI and everything we do now. But we still have to be very careful, even though it is so powerful. We're very careful about student data. We
Hmm.
want to make sure that we don't, provide information out there, and we have some policy in place for our students and our teachers. So we
Hmm.
have to really try to navigate that in a very careful way.
Right. No, absolutely. I think ethic part is very important. You also mentioned about the critical thinking aspect. How do you keep your individuality alive and not lost? Because if you are not have like Rick flavor or Avinash flavor in your strategies or in your outputs, then you very well be already replaced by AI. So So yeah, I
Well,
agree.
I think the way we evaluate students, you know, again, going back to AI, it's more than just, students going and writing a paper. And, I'm sure they might use AI to organize their thoughts, but they still need to be able to verbalize their
Yeah,
learning. I mean, there's more ways to find out that a student learns than just, printing out a paper.
right.
So I think our teachers are very good at making sure that AI is not what necessarily is producing the answer. It is helping the students get to that point where the student has internalized an answer.
No, I agree. In fact, if I look at all the different aspects, from teachers' administrative work to how are they making differentiated lesson plans, how are they making inclusive lesson plans, differentiated assessments, differentiated rubrics, how do you make your assignments much more working with AI rather than some assignment which is obviously easy to do with AI. And how are you grading those exam, giving students much more relevant feedback. I think on all the different aspects, how students are getting conceptual clarity with AI, how they are thinking of taking AI as a critic, as a research partner. I think on every aspect of learning in school, from career guidance to counseling to even student using it for multiple other purposes. I think there is a lot of things happening right now. So yeah, banning is definitely not an answer.
Well, it's really helping us. And when we're very data rich. We, like every school district, we have more data than we can ever. We're swimming in data, but the most important thing is analyzing the data. I
Yeah.
mean, and we've done a lot of things at looking at the student outputs, looking at student absences and other markers, if you will, and we look at their assessment scores, and AI is helping us to organize that information and helping us to really monitor those students that might need additional supports. So it really helps us to analyze that process in a much faster and meaningful way. So it really is a great tool as far as managing information and supporting students.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those information, those data, which was lying static, and we were not able to drive insights out of it or improvements. Even I have been hearing so many other applications of bus routing. People are optimizing because there were literally companies for it, and now all that is becoming democratized, and every company has to think what is the user experience that they're offering. So even they have to improve. And so yeah, I love that. So one thing that I always like, one section of our podcast is usually there's a question which is passed on to you by our previous guest, and they didn't know about you as a person, so it was a generic question that they sent, which I want to ask you. And of course, then I would also ask you to recommend a question that I would ask to the next guest. So it's like a series of connection that we make. So the question that was asked was, who has been an influential leader for you in your education journey, and any book recommendations that you might have?
Any book recommendations? Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I always look at my brother. My
Hmm.
brother also was a superintendent, and he was also an elected superintendent. And of course, growing up, he was kind of my role model. And he went into education. I went into education. He was a coach, and I became a coach. So I tried to follow his path.
Wow.
And by the way, he's retired now because he was not reelected. But he did really influence me a lot, and really just thinking about leaving a legacy and really pouring in the community. And I really owe a lot of credit to him. And so he's really been kind of my North Star, if you will.
Hmm.
Uh, as far as books go, um, I think one of the most profound books that I've read, and this has been years ago, is a book called Good to Great.
Okay.
Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Hmm.
And if you haven't read it before, is kind of a timeless book. But essentially, what happened is they did research on some of the most longest sustainable, successful organizations, business organizations in the United States. And they looked at what do these things have in common? And there are a number of things that I've been able to take away that I use to this day. And it really is talking about building those systems and really looking at the leader. They call the leader, they call it a system five leader. And I forget where they get that from, but essentially a leader is not someone that stands up and bosses people around and tells them what to do and, makes all the decisions. A system five leader in this book really is somebody who facilitates that leadership is, and you've heard this 1,000 times, but it's when you're in a room full of your fellow leaders or your subordinates, you really are trying to work together collaboratively, trying to find an answer to a problem, and you're really crowdsourcing, if you will. You're trying to find what's the best way to lead this organization. But more importantly, you build a systematic organization where when the leader retires or he leaves or whatever the case is, that organization continues to be successful, continues those systems, if you will, where there's not a up and down with them. It's a continual rise. And to me, I think that's something we've been able to do here. I've got some fantastic people that work alongside me, and I facilitate them. I ask the questions. I expect them to have the answers. So
Nice.
I try to model that same process as Jim Collins did in Good to Great, and really try to build those long, sustainable organizations that continue to improve, not rest on our laurels. So that's one of the most profound books that I've read. I've got a number of books that I've read that we've done book studies on here, just trying to speak that common language. And but that's probably one of the most profound ones that I read.
No, I love that. I actually have read one of the books by Jim Collins called "The Turning the Flywheel," which is about how you create a system again. It's a lot about systematic process that it can actually start to move things and scale things. So it was a very effective book for me in my startup journey. And yeah, I think now I would definitely put this into my wish list and will read this soon. So
And and again, that goes back to our graduation rate.
mhm.
You know, we're going to continue to get better because we have a systematic approach to improving graduation rates. And
Yeah,
our high school principals now have become experts on what kids need to do to graduate. And they can tell you to the single student, what student is not on track to graduate. And
nice.
we bring them together every so often, and they share practices with each other just because we're always trying to get better as a district.
So since you have done the graduation percentage problem, what's the next problem that you are picking up in your school district?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest problem here in Florida,
Hmm.
and it's starting to happen in a number of states, is the universal vouchers. Have you
Oh,
heard of that?
yeah, I've heard about that. The
Yep.
ESA, right?
And
Direct to
yeah,
student.
right. In Florida, they call it the Family Empowerment Scholarship. And essentially, um, students, the money that the state provides follow the student. So in
Hmm.
other words, if a student wants to leave the traditional public high school and they want to go to homeschool or they want to go to a private school, the money, which is about $9,000 per student in Florida, that money will follow them.
Hmm.
And that is creating a very challenging situation on funding for our traditional public schools. Every single district in Florida is facing this challenge right now. But more than that, what is created now is created a highly competitive environment
Hmm.
with public schools and private schools. And to me, I welcome that. I welcome the challenge
Hmm.
because I want our schools to be the best choice that students have. And
Nice.
that's why we have so many innovative programs. We have, and really our STEM program, which I hope we can talk about in a minute, really is a big attraction for our students. And because a lot of that stuff is not being offered on the private side, but if they want to be a part of that, they have to be in our schools. So we're just trying to make public schools, an attractive place to be. But that has become a major challenge in the state of Florida, and I think it's going to start being in other states too, where if we don't do something about it, we're going to have to start closing schools down because we're losing so many students.
Right. No, I think I love your outlook on it, that it's a challenge, and I think that's an important discussion. We can do it again on another podcast. But thank you so much. And now, last part, can you give me a question that I should ask the next school leader?
The next school leader?
Yeah. Any question that you want to know the answer for from someone else's perspective?
Yeah. Well, I would just like to know along the same lines that we're talking about as far as school choice. And I plan on doing that when I go to the next conference I'm going to. I'm going to talk to different superintendents and find out, what are you doing to make your school competitive with private schools? How are you making traditional public schools a choice for students and not just expecting students to show up because that's where they're zoned for? So I want to hear from other people you talk to. How are you being competitive?
That's such a powerful question to ask, and I'm definitely going to start asking that more. So thank you so much, Rick, for your great ideas. Love the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your information with knowledge with us.
And by the way, let me mention one thing that I'm probably most proud of, and this is part of our STEM program. But one thing that we're doing is we're actually offering flight school.
Oh.
Our kids now are taking flight. They're taking flight lessons on flight simulators. But here's the neat thing: our kids are actually flying airplanes now. We actually are doing air flight, and we've had 4 students this past year solo flight. So again, we're trying to meet a local industry need for pilots. And if you're in a private school, you're going to want to come to school with us because now you can fly an airplane and we're paying your way. So anybody listen to that, if you want to come be a part of our school district, hey, we can make you a pilot.
Wow. I think that's you won. I think you are gonna like having that kind of infrastructure and vision itself is such a big challenge. I'm not sure how others are going to compete with you on that front, but that's such a beautiful idea. Congratulations.
That's my advertisement or my commercial to come to our school district. So
yeah, and leave aside aviation. If you just wanna have like sky's the limit kind of thing.
Yeah.
At your school, literally sky is the limit.
Literally. Yeah. So just come here and you can pick your path.
You can put that into your prospectus that even sky is not the limit at Putnam.
I'm gonna capture that. I love that idea. That might be our tagline.
Love it. Thank you so much, Rick, for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information about Tomo Club, visit Tomo Club or follow us on our socials. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.